Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at the library of the Budapest Music Center. I am Gergely Fazekas, musicologist, and I'll be the host of this evening. There have been several mustMEET composer talks in the previous years, but this is the first one since the passing of Peter Eötvös. So we decided to talk not only about our guest, Benoît Sitzia. I'm really happy that you are here and accepted our invitation, but also about Peter, whose presence is here at BMC, and I think the whole musical life of Budapest and Hungary and the contemporary music world feel not his absence but his presence. This piece was written for his memory. Could you please explain a bit the music we just heard? I'm not sure if you like to talk about your music, but this is what I ask for.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm glad also to be able to pay a kind of a tribute to Peter. So yes, when we discuss about this moment, I was deeply thinking that Peter deserves a new piece, but I am very rich in idea but poor in time. So I offer to write this short piece, but it's for me quite a very condensed synthesis of what Peter was for me. A kind of a star, because at the beginning of the piece you hear this E harmonic, so he is for Eötvös, in fact, and there is all this upper line and down line of the low register of the violin that are slowly go to each other and meet at the middle, kind of an horizon, in fact, and this horizon is what it's give the name of the piece, because in French it's called son océan, son for sounds, and océan for ocean. But the ambiguity is also that you can also hear in French his ocean, because son and is the same word, so that the same sonority. And why did I refer to oceans? It's linked to the first documentary that made me discover Peter. It's called The Seventh Door. It was made by Judith Kelly, I think so. And at the end of the documentary, there is Peter recording the sound of ocean. And there is, I'm not sure it's the exact quotation, but it says at the end that his relationship to music and to sound is the same than a fish to water. He's not very aware that he's in, but he cannot live out. And for me, it was the best way to explain who he was. He was so naturally involved in music and sounds that it was not a posture, it was not an intellectual things, that it was just what he was. It was pure music, pure sonority, and all his mind, emotions and body was about that. So this small piece was trying to make that with small, and it's built on the Bartók scale all along. So
when you mentioned the concept of the star at the beginning, what came to my mind is a beautiful little video which is now on YouTube, where Peter is playing Cosmos, his piano piece, and he explains how the stars are there and the whole creation of the world is reflected in the music. How did you encounter Peter?
It was like a schoolboy dream, because when I was learning composition at Annecy Conservatory, small town in the French Alps, I discovered the music of Kurtág and Eötvös. And when someone one day in family meetings asked me if you can meet someone, whoever you want, in which period you want, who wants you to meet, I say instantly Peter Eötvös, and no one was knowing why, and I explained them. And
what was so attractive for you as a young composition student?
Because
so why not Bach or Mozart, or if
because he was he was alive already.
Yeah, that's a great advance. That's for sure.
Pragmatical ideas, but also because he literally saved my life as an artist, and he was not aware of that because I was not knowing him at this time, because I was learning music in a very French post-structural compositional process, so all has to be very technical mind setting on the paper. And I remember I was in a beautiful place in front of the mountains. I have all the perfect condition to be a proper artist, and I remember writing down on my paper sheet an A, and I was unable to write the second pitch because it was just too much probabilities, too much stuff.
Too much thinking.
Yeah, not too much things that are not music, in fact, that are what we can say about music, but not music, in fact. And I was like for months without being able to write something, and I was starting to think that my artistic life was kind of destroyed. And one day I just remember falling on the recording of Do Re Mi, the violin concerto of Peter Eötvös. And it was quite obvious that it was my salvation here, because I just feel, this is the solution to all my problem here. I was not clearly seeing why.
Do, re, mi is not a very complicated solution.
But also it was so creative, so natural, so powerful, so expressive, so all what I cannot reach with all my mental issue process for composing music. And it's just allowed me to continue to write music, but in my own way. So he saved my artistic life, and he gave me one of the greatest gifts is the example of freedom.
And then your dream came true when you met him. How did it happen?
It's a very human story, in fact, and it was always like that with Peter, because I was working with Odile Auboin, who is a solo viola player. She's a soloist from the Ensemble Intercontemporain. And one day she told me that she was expecting to meet Peter to work on Des Accords 2, two viola piece. And I said, okay. So she told me that I write to Peter, so I'm going to Budapest, and I do really want to get someone to be aware of what the piece is about, and also to film the process of working and all what he has to say about this piece. And here we are, we go to Budapest, and we were welcome at his house with Maria, who were here also. And it was quite unbelievable, because it was a dream-like for me. And we arrived, and Peter was here and make me sit down at the table and say, "Do you want a coffee?" I say, "Yes." And Peter Eötvös was serving me a coffee. And he told me, Maria just done a very, very good apple pie. Do you want to taste it? I say, yes. And he served me an apple pie. And it was just like, it's unbelievable, because the person that I was expecting the most to meet was just serving me a coffee and a piece of cake. And it was just like, okay. And it starts all day long like this. And we have beautiful discussion about the music, about everything. And it was super nice.
And then you worked together. What did you learn because you told us what you learned from afar when you didn't know him, but after you met him and you worked together, you saw him how he worked. What were the main experiences, or was there a moral for the story, if as it were?
It's been the same than afar. In fact, it was just more close to me, because even though we were discussing about music, it was never about what it's good or not good to say about a piece of music or a composer. It was always what's it interesting or not, what is sounding, what is kind of a question that we can go through in a piece from the repertoire to new music. And I think it's the mark of the greatest artists that they are teaching us something strong, even if we don't know them, you know. Because sometimes there are people that you learn more when you know them than just by being in touch with their works. And it's not the case with Peter. With Peter, you learn a lot when you're in touch with him, but you're also learning a lot by just being in touch with his music. So, which means that he is one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. And what I learned is freedom. It's always being pragmatical about the approach of music. It's why I refer to this quote of the fish and the sea, because it's always like you are in a sounding universe. You are expecting to make music with other people, so you have to build all the condition for make it possible and make it efficient, and make it also at the greatest level, artistical level possible, but also at the greatest human level possible, because it's always that what I saw the most moving from him. It was whenever in the last year, it's what he was always careful about people. I have one souvenir at a concert here. We were sitting in the front row, and it appears that the piano was still the cover of the piano was still open, and the percussion player was behind it, and the pianist was not playing, and the piece was about to start, and it just was going up from his seat and say, we cannot see her, and it was just like going through. I say, no, I'm going, because he was very careful about the fact that the percussion player was not behind the piano cover, because she's playing and she deserves to be seen as a player. And it's especially this kind of details that make him one of the greatest artists I know.
You said something very important. You said several things that are very important, but one was peculiar for me when you said that he was always very pragmatic, which is really interesting, because his career as a musician, as a mature musician, and as a composer started with the ensemble of Stockhausen, and then he went to the ensemble intercontemporain de Boulez, where we can see that these great minds were not really they did not really care about the human possibilities, the circumstances. They just wrote the music they dreamed about. And what do you think about, as a composer yourself, what do you think about this very important issue of being practical and pragmatic versus go and follow your dreams and then something will happen? Because I think that can be found in several different eras. Like, I think, for example, that Handel, for example, was pragmatic and Bach was not pragmatic at all. And you can find all this dichotomy in every era.
I agree on the difference between Handel and Bach, but Bach was unpragmatical and a pragmatical level, because for now, for example, I think that we have to be pragmatic, but not resigned to dream about a new work and in the most perfect and not earthy way. But when you want to produce it with other people, you have to create the condition to make it appear. And it's just about that. If I'm starting to write down some rhythmical pattern that I cannot sing myself or beat myself, how am I supposed to ask other people to do it? Because I am not able to transmit the information. So I can produce it with a computer because I can program the computer, but regarding a human relationship in music, we have to communicate about something. So there is the technical issue, so you have to work on your techniques, but regarding that, you have also to consider that when you are addressing yourself to, for example, instrumentalists, you have to consider their instrument, the way this instrument was built and where you can drive it as far away possible. But for example, when I was in Paris Conservatory, I was always questioning the very proudness of some composer who arrive in the room and say, "Oh, can you hear that? The violin is sounding like a clarinet now." I say, "But right, for a clarinet it's more simple and the violinist player is going to be happier because you're not going to destroy his instrument by putting a lot of stuff in it." And it's always find the good balance in between experimentation and what's work and what is not working. And I think Peter was quite good at that, because when he was working with Stockhausen, there is a lot of experimentation going on, but always also in a very concrete way, that they were using tools, they were producing sounds, and it's not like just in the head. I think the difference is when you're stuck in your heads.
Yes, and Peter was also really deeply connected to the great classical tradition, as he was a student of the Liszt Academy, and then he, as a conductor, conducted a lot of classical pieces too. What is your relationship to the great classical tradition?
There is in which way? Sorry.
As a composer, is it a burden? Is it a possibility for you that, because as a listener or as a music enthusiast, it's really strange that, you know, most of the music we listen to in the classical field is very old music. We listen to the great tradition, and your music and all the new music that is written now has to be somehow part of this ecosystem. Okay. So you have to have a relationship to that.
Yes, I'm not trying to enforce these relationships to the repertoire or to the ancient music, but in some parts it's still alive, because I like to make some parallel with the literature, for example. If I still read some theater piece or poem from Shakespeare, it's still a very attractive and living creative process that is very inspiring. So I always try to find not what is aesthetically good in something in the repertoire, but what is the creative process that I can use or inspire myself with. And I'm not from a family, there is no musician in my family, in fact, so I was discovering all the repertoire very late, like when I was 10 to now, still. So I hardly try to make my music feed by all it's already existing in music history, not repeating it by unconsciousness. But sometimes I also assume that my music sounds not so new, but it sounds personal. So I always assume that sometimes there is a balance in between what is new and what can be referring to something existing. But it's not a very present question in my mind. But I'm also always trying, when I teach, for example, new music to a young player, I always try to make them connect. What is available when you try to find solution for playing Eötvös music is also a solution for Mozart, for example. Because if the player can find his or her own path by this way, it makes all this music in the same environment, in fact.
I ask this question because the second piece we are going to hear from you is a recent piece, Éloge du Chant, which is a piece for solo cello, and it was commissioned by Cameron Crossman, a great cellist, and there is a very interesting idea behind the whole project in which you were involved, and it's really connected to this question of tradition and new music. Could you please explain the story of the piece?
Yes, we were in Paris Conservatory together with Cameron, and I conduct him in my own music, and at the end he say, I like your music, I want to commission you a piece because I have a project, I want to commission 7 new pieces, and I want to highlight them with Gabriele Ricercari for solo cello.
Which are the first pieces written for cello?
Yes,
in the late 17th century. Before
the Bach cello suites also. And I say, okay, which Ricercar from Gabriele you want me to write? He say, no, don't care about that. Write your piece, and I will pick up the good Ricercar to highlight your music. And it was quite a clever way to do it, in fact, because I was like completely free in the creative process. I was not like, okay, it's gonna be in G minor, so I have to burden a G or whatever, you know. And the thing is that he made the whole project is a completely new CD that was released a few months ago, and it works very well. And you highlight this BACH stuff, which is clearly what I was mentioned before. That I knew and I practice also as a guitar player and also as an organ player, the bar music. So the motive.
Just to let you know, when Benoît sent me the score, I just discovered that, oh yes, at the very beginning there is this BACH motif, which is not very, I mean, it's not very obvious, but it's there.
It's there, and it was not consciousness at the beginning, because I was firstly looking at the very expressive register from the cello, and I was looking at very a particular interval section for developing the piece after, and it appears that yes, it's not coming from nowhere, because I was used to this, but it was not intentional. So it makes the link to the Bach music very natural in some ways, but it was not an intentional tribute to that.
Okay, let us listen now to this piece, and with a wonderful video recording played by Cameron Crossman. In one of his interviews, when Peter was asked about how he composed his operas, he said that I imagine the stage and then I write down what I hear. How do you compose? Like, so how do you start, for example, if you know that that will be a solo cello piece that's given, and then what happens then?
It's a bit the same, in fact. So, but for me, it's more concentrated in one or two elements. But I have to admit that I am retarding the moment of taking the pen to write music the most late possible, because I need to process it in. And at one point, I start to feel that the musical material is starting to organize itself, and I walk a lot. I need to go outside and to walk a lot to think about music. And by walking, it's like I find a rhythm, I find a kind of an articulation for the first material, and after that, I am going on the table and I'm written down, and I develop the sometimes the material, sometimes not. But it's always linked to also a kind of an image of something. I'm always working a lot by picturing the musical idea that I want to hear. So, because when I was young, my first approach to orchestral music was very linked to movie music, in fact. So for me, the sounds are very linked to a representation of something. So, and there is also almost an embodiment of some character in the music that you cannot hear because it's just for me. But there is, for example, in the violin piece that you heard, there is this star going progressively to the horizon, and there is this character on hers that starting to also join the horizon. So for me, it's kind of personal theater, inner theater. And but in these cello pieces, for example, it was also I am fascinating by the viola da gamba. Viola da gamba. Because we have a strong tradition in France of composer with Philippe de Sainte-Colombe, Marat. And I was trying to find a way to reach this very organic way to use the bow, you know, because it's always like kind of a dance with the instrument. And I say, okay, what could be the perfect way to use the musical idea that I have and find and involve the body of the player in this kind of dance with the instrument. And it's quite what I try to reach at the end of the piece. But I try to create a way to go through that. So sometimes I have the starting point and the meeting point, but I have to find the line in between those 2 points.
You play several different instruments. You conduct. You are the music director of Ars Nova Ensemble. How does all these activities affect your composing?
I write short piece.
Because you don't have time, or because
yes. No, I still, as long as I remember, I was writing short piece of music, but I realized that my approach of composition is very pragmatically linked to my schedule, in fact, because I have few hours to compose at the end of the day, early in the morning or in the night. So I have to it has a clear incidence on my creative process, but you know, there is a you can say the same for a lot of composers in history that were managing a lot of activity, and so their creative process were linked also to the kind of business that they have to manage within all days.
But how can you schedule inspiration? So what if, I mean, you have 2 hours in the afternoon and inspiration doesn't come? What happens then?
It's because maybe I can, when I have the inspiration, even though if I'm not available to write it down, I can lock it in my somewhere in here or here, I don't know still, but it's more like for me it's more like if I have to use a kind of an image to describe it. Maybe someone can help me. A barrage, you know, when you want to produce electricity by putting a wall and lock the water. Comment on appelle barrage?
What is the English word for that?
I don't know the English word, but you know, when you want to produce electricity with water, you build this big wall and the water is retained after, and you have to lock the river. But it's the same for me. Mm-hmm. I am producing creative electricity by retaining my musical inspiration.
And then when you have time...
And then when I have 2 hours, it's like straight to the point.
Peter Eötvös said in several interviews that, and I think it's a very important and very honest sentence, that he has a language, a musical language, but he's using different styles. And I think for someone who listens to his music, it's sometimes really, really hard to catch, you know, because language is something so basic that, you know, you would say that, well, this piece was written by another composer. And I think this is a very big question for everyone who writes music now, with all this music we listen to, all the music we are, we hear, we don't listen, we just hear them, from traditional music to pop music to classical music. So is style or your own language important, or you just write the music and then it will come out and it will have the traits which connect them because it is written by the same person?
It's a very important question, because when you are trained in French conservatory, it's a very present question of being aware and consciousness about your own language, your own style. And I think it's a wrong question, because in fact your own language and style is defined by other, not by you, and by people who hear and receive your music. I'm more maybe ready to say that I have my toolbox, you know, and I know when I want to use these tools or these tools, I can use it. And it's the way I use those tools that make my style or language, or because I'm not comfortable also with the fact that saying that music is language, because I'm not sure of that. And
what is music?
It's Victor Hugo was saying that music was sounds with mindset. So, and the thing is that, for example, when you think about Stravinsky's music, he go through different aesthetic periods, but you can always recognize that is Stravinsky who is written this music, because he used his tools in a certain way. So even if it's neoclassical, Swiss period or whatever, it's Stravinsky. And there is a kind of creative process and expressivity that's also very present, that characterize the music of Stravinsky. And I think it's, I am not asking myself the question, where am I today? Because as a composer, because for me it's not an important question. It's better to ask me, did I have enough tools in my toolbox to write the music that I want to write? And also, did I clearly say or express what I want to express with this piece or this piece or this piece? And I can also humbly admit that some of my pieces can be difficult to relate one to each other, but I don't care, in fact.
So we listened to a solo violin piece and a solo cello piece, and now we are going to listen to a piece that is written for an ensemble. It was written for Ensemble Intercontemporain and for Matthias Pincher. Could you please explain a bit how it was conceived and what the title means?
Echo manifest mean everyone's know what is an echo. I don't need to explain that. And manifest is what's it's invisible becoming visible, kind of a manifestation of something, and is in this the poetical ideas of these pieces. How a piece of music can embody something invisible in life. And it's kind of a different door piece. It's not so much door than in Bluebeard Castle, but there is several doors, and it's always like crossing a landscape and going to another landscape and going to another landscape. And technically how I build this piece is that if I well remember, I have 15 players available, and I built some different chamber music group in the ensemble. So it was from 5 to 1. 5 was the 5 string of the ensemble, 3 violin, 2 viola. No, there were 6, sorry. 2 violin, 2 viola, 6, sorry. 3 violin, 2 viola, cello, and double bass. And after I reduce all the chamber music group to the solo piano. So all the piece is built about the way that those groups are interacting in between themselves, and each group has its own landscape, musical landscape. And at one point, all those landscapes are melting, and there is this kind of solo section piano appearing. And the pianist was a bit not deceived but destabilized, because I was going to see him. I say, it's kind of a concerto for piano. So he was like, great. But it's not really a concerto for piano. So during the rehearsal, he was a bit destabilized by his position, very central in the ensemble, but not so soloist. It was kind of more a poetical idea.
Okay, it's a 9-minute piece, but I edited we are listening to approximately the last 3 minutes. But so we enter one of the doors, but not the first one. So let us listen now to the piece Echo Manifeste de Benoît Sitzia.
I have forgot to say a very important thing in this piece is that all the material of this 9 or 10 minute piece is based on a solo viola piece, a very solo viola piece, which was written in 2018 and which is dedicated to Peter, in fact. It was in a trio, flute, viola, harp trio, and each instrument of the trio have a solo, a very short solo piece in between the three movements in trio. And the viola is dedicated to Peter, and they're si, do, si, do, si, do, si, the minor seconds. And all the musical material from the piece is based on how I can deduce a whole words from a minor second and a major second. And it's all dispatched in all the ensemble. And the two horns, for example, are starting from a fifth, and they are just starting all the pieces by meeting at the minor seconds and starting to open to another fifth. And it's all what I can. I love to play with some very minimalistic ideas and try to create a whole universe with two pitches, for example.
So this piece was written for the ensemble created by Pierre Boulez, and you have also connections to IRCAM, as I think all French composers have some connection, maybe negative or positive. I'm really curious about what is the role of IRCAM and this whole Boulezian tradition now in a life of a French composer, because that was one of the greatest things in the 70s and the 80s. But then there were voices who said that, Boulez is like a dictator, he's the musical Stalin, and there were really, really harsh critics against Boulez and how he dominated the mindset of the whole French contemporary music scene. And Peter also talked a bit about that, how he became independent of this as a composer when he left Ensemble Intercontemporain.
We have to be careful about this.
You are in Hungary now, in a safe space, so you can
space.
say whatever you want.
Not be careful.
It's recorded and will be put up on YouTube, but you can tell whatever you want.
But not be careful about the meaning of an institution, but being careful about, for example, you just told about how Boulez can be perceived sometimes, but I'm very convinced that if we give to another composer, Grisey, for example, the same money to build something, and he have done a bit the same, and we were afterwards saying the same things about Grisey, that he was preferring spectral music than to whatever. So, but I have to say that Boulez has one thing that we cannot take from him. He was thinking about the future and about the generations that were coming after him. So he built institutions that are now producing composers that say bad things about him. So it's a good democratic exercise, because a lot of composers coming out of the IRCAM today say that Boulez is just a Stalinist, what, blah, 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 blah. So yes, but you were happy to have the IRCAM, and the IRCAM was built by him. So whatever. I never been studying at the IRCAM, in fact. I was commissioning by the festival, and the Eco Manifest was creating during Manifest, which is the IRCAM festival, that we play also last year with Gregory Wojda to play with Ars Nova. We play Laborantus 2 from Berlioz there. So it's a great institution, and they are also having a very, very leading role in developing new technology for music. You're maybe not aware of that, but most of the hardware or software for music, electronic and whatever, which are used in all the industry, are producing there. So it's a very important institution. But as a composer, sometimes, maybe a few years ago, we were feeling obliged as French composer to go through this process to get the stamps of the institution, but it was not the case for me, and I really feel free from that feeling of obligation or whatever. And the IRCAM is doing its job, and never. impeach anyone to do their own music. But in France, we have the chance to get a very plural musical environment. So there is a place for a bit all of musical aesthetic. If you have been studying at the ERCAM or not, you can have new works performed by Intercontemporain or Philharmonic Orchestra, whatever. So, and Ensemble Ars Nova, for example. And but today, I'm a bit relativistic about the weight of institution regarding the career of a composer, because now I feel more and more the need to reinvent something here, just not being to the Paris Conservatory and after at the ERCAM. And there is some things appearing now, and it's still a bit an intuition for me, that there is something to be recreating about not necessarily the parcours of composer, but the way a composer is able to integrate recent history of music and makes kind of a fusion of it, you know, and also maybe being more close to the environment of music. So, meaning by this way, integrating a lot of different aspects of music in it, the way that you're producing music, because for example, we see that the traditional or classical format of the concert with 4 or 5 pieces from 15 minutes is more and more questionable for the audience. But we also, from another side, see more and more interest in new music project with theater, dance, stage management, and whatever. So there is quite of a mutation here, and so the ERCAM is producing something interesting for one part of it, but it's not the whole part for a new composer, for example.
And when you talk about the fusion of different musical aspects, do you open it up to like pop music or traditional music? So what do you think about being open to every music in the world? Because for a long time, contemporary classical music was quite closed to these influences, and in the last decades there seems to be an opening up for anything.
The problem is that I return the question that I don't know what is contemporary music today, nowadays, you know, because when we say contemporary music, what are we speaking about, really?
I can tell you the answer.
Tell me,
I have a theory.
Yes.
I think every music that is performed today is contemporary. So Bach is also contemporary if it is performed today by someone who is living here for others who are also living here. So every music is contemporary.
So I very agree with you. And nice. And not but because, for example, I can speak from the French point of view. Speaking about contemporary music is speaking about a cliché of music. It's not speaking about the music that appears today. And for example, I do really think that composers have the challenge today of being more open to integrate different aspects in their works, not making a kind of a poor dish with a bit of pop stuff, a bit of traditional music stuff and whatever, but maybe in the first step being aware that the relationships to the audience is changing now, because we are more and more dematerialized. Also, we listen more and more music by distance and not only in concert hall or concert places, whatever and which form it is. And for example, I'm very interested in the relationship with the traditional music, because it's a non-written down music. So it's a music that has been transferred generation from generation only by the way of reproducing what someone is showing you. And but it's also a music that has find new way to produce itself, also by being melt with amplified music and whatever. For example, I know a hurdy-gurdy player which starts to play with traditional ball in his small town in the southwest of France. And at one point in his career, he was playing in the hugest hard metal festival because he was playing hurdy-gurdy with amplified pedals, distortion, and whatever. So his background was traditional music, but he enhanced it in a whole new and creative environment. So maybe we have the same opportunity here today with classical contemporary music, is that we are not limited by technological purpose. We are not limited now by aesthetical purpose because we have opened so much door that now we have a lot of tools we can use. But now maybe we have to ask which story we want to put on stage and to put on music today, because I think the greatest challenge of the 21st century is which narrative for music now? Because for the 18th century we have formal development, for 19th century we have poetical and the personification of the artist with the Liszt, Wagner and whatever. After that we have the phantasmagory of the modernity in music. After that we have the technological development. But now, which way we are going to use for make people work together and communicate it to new music to a society that is now full of information. So it's why I'm speaking a bit of a fusion, but also finding a unique way to create a new narrative for music.
And when you compose music, how much do you think about your audience, your future audience? Do you write for a specific public, or is it do you take it into consideration?
Yes, but not completely, because I'm writing first for a player most of the time, or for a group of players. So it's my first thought is going to. I've never written down a piece that was not commissioned. So it was always for someone that I was already aware.
It's very 18th century.
Yes, sure. I never say that I was contemporary composer. And more than thinking about the audience, I always try to step back when I'm in the writing process to say, am I expressing myself clearly or not? You know, because I think that the audience is not how to say that. When you address directly to the sensitivity of people, even if they have the background or not, they can understand or feel what you want to express. For example, is the cello piece is clearly what I was trying to reach, is what is the more natural way to speak to people through a cello. And I'm sure that even for people who are not specialized in contemporary music, they can catch something in the piece and hear something that they can tell them a story or whatever. So it's more being clear in the way that I express and not hiding my poetical idea with a lot of complexity of contemporary stuff, you know, just being as clear as possible. And it's why my eraser is like very small, because I use it a lot. I always write a lot of musical material, and secondly, I erase a lot of stuff in my music.
Yeah, I just read a wonderful doctoral dissertation about one of the operas of Peter Eötvös, and the doctoral student made a long interview with Peter, where he mentioned his erasure. It was also very important for him. We have one last piece for today, and we decided to close the evening with a piece by Peter, and this is a piece called A Call. And on the wonderful website of Peter Eötvös, you can find this beautiful image of the beginning of the piece. It was written for Patrycja Kopaczynskaya, and that was she commissioned the piece, and that was a present. And what is really interesting, and I'm really curious if you use this technique, is that the main idea for the music is based on a sentence written by James Joyce, and the call, pure, long and throbbing, longing, dying call, and the way one says the sentence is creating the musical ideas, and then the whole piece is a variation. So do you use this technique that, you know, you use the human speech as the basis for your composition?
Yes, and the human voice articulation also, because I am singing a lot when I compose, always to find what is the most natural way to articulate sounds, to articulate the rhythm also, because we forget sometimes that the first reaction of a player is his voice, is that to sing, to trying to find the good way to producing it, or even when they are just working on rhythm, they are trying to find the natural body language of it. And it's a very interesting part of the piece, and also because I think it's one of the very, very genius part of the creative process of Peter, that he was catching just small elements and make a whole universe with it. And you spoke about Cosmos, because Cosmos is just marvelous, because there is Cosmos, Psi, and Psychocosmos. After that, there is two pieces, creating a third piece. And there is also this in Do Re Mi, the violin concerto that I was speaking about, because it's just C, D, E, and he create the whole piece, the whole concerto about this major third, and it's just marvelous to see that. And I think there is also the same in the piece for string quartet and voice. He used also recording of voice. This is Siren Cycle for string quartet, and
this is also based on Joyce.
Yes,
Ulysses.
it's also based on Joyce, and he used also recording of voice to produce all the material. So
I'm really grateful for this talk, and before we listen to the piece, I just want to tell you that there is a wonderful new recording just launched by the label of BMC with the recent pieces of Peter Eötvös. And for those who don't know it, I just want to let you know that there is this workshop for young conductors now in progress or in the making. And I'm really grateful for you, Benoît, for being with us. And let us now listen to the piece A Call by Peter Eötvös, performed by Catherine Jacquet.
Thank you.